Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the RGR Football Channel on YouTube. My name is Daniel Harms, and as you can see, I'm behind a completely blank wall. Everything in my house is being packed up as it stands right now, and today we are going to get into my wide receiver rankings for the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, if you've been following along on Twitter and what we've talked about on the Q&As for the most part, you'll kind of have an understanding of where I start with these rankings, and we're going to do a little bit more of a tier by tier, and we're going to start with the first three. We talk about a little bit here and there. We're not going to go into hugely detailed about these three guys for the Chiefs purposes because they're not going to fall to them at 31. After that, we're going to get into some of the players that could fall down depending on runs that happen in the draft. So without any further ado, we're going to kick this off and we're going to break everything down. Let's get rolling. To no one's surprise, Jamar Chase is my number one receiver in this NFL draft. He is an incredible specimen of as a player, 19-year-old that really dominated the college football rankings. He was one of the most incredible players in 2020, having, like I said, the breakout age 19, physically dominating corners like AJ Terrell. You're seeing right here in the national championship game. He dominated AJ Terrell, made him look like he was a cornerback out of nowhere that played for no reason. They just kept lining him up against him. Terrell went to the Atlanta Falcons at the number 16th pick last year. He was a first round draft pick, and Jamar Chase absolutely bullied him. He is probably the best prospect in the draft at the catch point, with multiple ways he can win. He can win with the hands away from him. He can win over his shoulder. He locates the ball extremely well. He plays through physicality well. And as you can see here, he even with the arm over his left arm, he's able to corral this football. What makes him able to do this, like I said, is the ability to locate the football. AJ Terrell's behind him here, trying to play the catch point. When you're playing against a receiver like Chase, who is able to do these things and find the ball wherever it is, you're not going to be able to win that way. For me, Jamar Chase is the number one receiver because he's still so young. Yes, there are some questions going into this draft process with his regards to some of his route running, his explosiveness after the catch. But when you're able to dominate, SEC corners and first round draft pick corners as a 19-year-old, that speaks to something. And the ceiling for him is really limitless. So I have no issues ranking him as my number one receiver in this draft. So we are going to go ahead and get to our next player, who is, again, to nobody's surprise, DeVonta Smith. For me, he's different for a guy his size. And I know that there's a lot of questions about his frame. Very small, 6'1", 175 is probably where he's going to max out weight-wise. He might put on some weight to weigh in at his pro day this month, but he's not going to be the most physically demanding in terms of a Calvin Johnson or even a Jamar Chase at over 200 pounds. He is going to win with footwork and the way that his intelligence speaks to the game. He runs routes so cleanly and he gets open so crisply that he's just always open. There's a reason that Mac Jones was feeding him even when Jaylen Waddle was on the field for them in 2020, because he's always open. The best thing that he does, in my opinion, is run comeback routes. He doesn't just stop at the top of his hitch. He comes back to the football. He locates it. He sees where the defense is coming at, and then he comes back to the football and destroys some angles that way. Because when you're running that hitch route, excuse me, you're coming back to the football, and you stop and you wait for it, because usually the ball is either coming out of the quarterback's hands or it's already on his way. With Mac Jones, he was able to make up for some inaccuracies when he came back to the football. He doesn't have the strongest arm. So Smith was able to do all of that in the intermediate parts of the field while also attacking deep down the field. His speed is the most underrated part of his game. He's able to attack down the field as well as get open against man coverage, press coverage. He's got great hands, great footwork, like I've mentioned before. And really, it's up here. He knows the game so well, and he's able to see where the defense is, where he's going to be able to get open, and the ways that he needs to move his body around to get to a football in a contested catch situation. That's something that I think that a lot of people kind of take for granted. Yeah, he played in the SEC. So not only was he playing against some of the best competition, he was putting up the best numbers. And oftentimes when Jaylen Waddle is not on the field, all the attention goes to him. So he was able to do all of that while having the attention of most defenses on him. He was double covered. He was playing against good press coverage. He's a physical receiver. He plays much bigger than he is. And that's the reason he's up here for me, because he's able to do things that other receivers his size can't do, and other twitchier guys that are a little bit smaller than him or faster than him can't do either, because he's able to play through that contact so well and through his routes. So for me, he's the number 2 receiver in this draft. And I really have him and Jamar Chase kind of doing this for me, because he's just they're both so good at what they do. And I've seen DeVonta Smith run a ton of different routes. So I like being able to witness what he's doing. Even though he was a senior, 22-year-old senior, when he really had that huge year, he was also the best receiver on the team in 2019, in my opinion. He had a great year that year too. So for me, that's just how it is. Now we're going to get into the third guy on this list, and this is where the tier ends for me, because these 3 receivers I truly believe are going to come in and be explosive players in the NFL. Like, they're going to come into their team, whatever team they're drafted on, and they're going to have an immediate impact. And everyone else is there's probably about a gap this big for the rest of the receivers in this class. But number 3 for me is Jaylen Waddle, and DeVonta Smith and Jaylen Waddle are very, very good, and they're very different from what they do. Jaylen Waddle is, I'm not going to say he's the most explosive in this class, but he's like right near the top. He's one of the most explosive players to come out in the last decade. You take out Tyreek Hill from the equation, and Jaylen Waddle is probably right there as the most explosive guy. With the ball in his hands, he can do literally anything. He can reverse course. He can stop on a dime, cut back to the football, find it, and go get it. He's got the ability to come back to the football as well, like DeVonta Smith does. They had to get used to that at Alabama, because Mac Jones is not the best deliverer of the football. He has some issues with arm strength and getting the ball where it needs to be. So when you're seeing them run their routes, they're constantly coming back to the football and having to play through some contact to get there. So they had to adjust on the fly with that. Oftentimes he's underthrown. He's clearly open down the field a lot when he's on the field, and Mac Jones just doesn't have the arm to get in there. So you can see him not only having those wide open opportunities to make big plays, but also the ability to come back to a football every now and then and go get it. So that's something he's adapted to his game. He's a bit shorter and more compact than DeVonta Smith is. So he's got the frame for his size that works in the NFL. Like Tyreek Hill, for example, like we've talked about a lot, at 5'10, like almost 190, now 200, almost 200 pounds. He has the ability to play through a lot of contact because he's put on the weight and he's adapted to the NFL game. And that's something that Jaylen Waddle was doing in the SEC. He's muscular. He's got the nice bulky frame. So not only does he have the most speed in this draft class, he's able to make some catches in contested situations that a guy like Tyreek Hill had to learn to do in the NFL. He's coming in already being able to do that. And, he's a home run threat every time he touches the football. He's going to be able to get the football behind the line of scrimmage, in the short parts of the field, intermediate parts of the field, deep down the field. He can attack at all 3 levels of the game. The only thing I'm worried about is them trying to force him into a gadget type role, the NFL, I mean, trying to force him into that situation to get the ball in his hands. He can run routes. He was asked to run routes in Alabama. He can do it. So let him be who he is, and you're going to see why he's one of the most explosive players to come out in the last decade. He's just that good with the football. You can get him the ball without having to be a gadget player or gimmicky with it. So he's number 3 for me. Now, this is where that tier breaks up, because those are the top 3 guys in this draft class for me, and that's where I've got them, and then we separate everybody else behind them. My next guy, I'm a much higher on than a lot of people and a lot of people's consensus, and that's Terrace Marshall Jr. He's an interesting case for me, because when you go back to his 2019 tape, obviously he's behind Jamar Chase, he's behind Justin Jefferson, behind, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of receiving on that team. But I watched him 2019, I watched him 2020. Being on the team with Justin Jefferson really benefited him. He wasn't the quickest and smoothest mover in and out of his cuts in 2019. You flash forward to 2020, and that clears up. He's got very good hip sync. He's tall. He's 6'3", 210 pounds, 215 pounds. He's got the deep speed to win down the field, the frame to go up and catch some of these deep balls in 50-50 situations. But he's also got the hip fluidity, and now he's got quicker feet to run some of the shorter intermediate routes. He runs very good post routes. He does things over the middle of the field that you really want to see from a guy that size, but he's got the speed to really break away. And there's a clip, I forget who he was playing against. but he catches the football over the middle of the field and he breaks 3 tackles going into it, much like we saw Sammy Watkins do against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the beginning of 2019 season. He kind of ran through everybody into the end zone. It was almost exactly like that, from the left side of the field, coming over, running through traffic and getting to the end zone. That's the kind of thing that he brings to a team. He's got the breakaway speed at his size, and that combination of route running and deep threat ability isn't very easy to find in these draft classes. He's much faster than a guy like Rashod Bateman, who I know he had a 4.3 that was recorded at his pro day, whatever that was. But I don't trust a lot of those. The NFL Combine is where we get most of the most accurate numbers. And play speed is very important. Bateman does not play that fast. He's very good, but he doesn't play as fast as Marshall does. That's the difference for me. They're both very similar in terms of what they bring to a team. I think that Marshall's route running has now gotten to the point where it's on point where it needs to be going into the NFL. Bateman's had that, he was in 2019 when he played with Tyler Johnson. He was the best route running receiver in college football, in my opinion. He's very good at getting open. But now Terrace Marshall's ability to get open in the middle of the field and also really attack downfield, but by not only by getting the football in 50-50 situations, but clearly running past people and getting open on his own and creating that separation is what separates him from Bateman from me. Because you can also get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage and have him take it to the house. He does have that kind of speed. And that's why, for me, Marshall is here. And if you notice, we've got 2 LSU guys and 2 Alabama guys in the top 4. That's just kind of how it worked out for me as I'm evaluating their film. They've got some of the best skill sets in this class. And this is, from top to bottom in the top 10 for my wide receiver rankings, it's heads and shoulders above the 2019 wide receiver class, which was very good. So for me, I think Terrace Marshall is a dark horse to have the best season out of anybody drafted in this draft class going into 2021 season. That's how highly I think of his upside. That's why he's number 4 for me. And we just talked about him. The number 5 guy on this list for me is Rashod Bateman. I really threw out his 2020 tape. He did not look like the same player. He looked a bit heavier. He looked a bit lackadaisical in terms of his headspace. He didn't seem like he was really in this season. And it's not all of his fault. COVID with the Big Ten played a huge impact on how they were playing. They said they weren't going to play, then they were going to play. So he had, to make a decision whether he was going to come play. And I think that he put on a little bit of weight in anticipation of not playing this season, but that kind of hindered his ability in terms of yard after catch ability and getting open on his own. But he's a technician with his route running. This is much like Justin Jefferson was last year in terms of people undervalued him because he's so technically gifted at getting open on his own. They kind of didn't see anything as more of an elite trait. But getting open in the NFL is an elite trait. And that's why Justin Jefferson had the season that he had last year. He is incredible at getting open against whoever he's playing against. Rashod Bateman has that exact type of ability, maybe not in terms of yards after the catch like Justin Jefferson has, but his footwork is impeccable. He's got great hands at the catch point. Some drops littered throughout his tape, much like Marshall's. I should have mentioned that earlier. He and Marshall are interesting in that terms of they have some weird drops on their resume that just kind of go through their hands. Weird concentration drops that just kind of make you think a little bit. But you take away some of the drops because everyone in the NFL deals with them at different times. There are the elite hands in the NFL, and there's everybody else. And that's where they're going to fall. They're going to have really good hands, but sometimes they're just going to drop some things. That's just going to happen. But like I said, he's a technician with his footwork. I think he's a 4.45 guy, to be honest with you. I think that he does have the ability to take it to the house and get by some guys in a go route situation, but I'm not so certain he has the ability to take like a slant and cut through everybody and get into the end zone. I never really saw that type of explosive acceleration and top end speed on his film. And it's very possible it could be there. Maybe he lost that weight again, lost more weight and got into better shape going into this draft process. And there's a reason he ran what he ran at his pro day. So that's always possible. I never want to, say that he'll never get to that point when it comes to prospects because you don't really know. This is just a projection of what I've seen on film. And he can win in multiple ways too. He can create his own separation with his routes. He can also win at the catch point. These top 5 guys are really, really good at winning at the catch point and winning in multiple ways. Really, the top 6 guys, the guy I'm going to talk about next, is the same way. And that's something that really separates them from everybody else, is because they can truly win in 2 ways. And that's what, for me, is required to be a true, success in the NFL. Yeah, you can be a slot guy that can win a couple different ways, but you can be, regulated to the slot only or to the outside only. I think that these guys, Bateman and Marshall, can win inside or outside against multiple different types of coverages. And that's what's going to, allow them to be really, really successful in the NFL for a long time. Excuse me. So yeah, these 2 are in my next tier as well. So this is the 5th rank for me with Rashod Bateman. I think he's going to be great out of the gate too, especially if he comes in focused like he did in 2019 when he was playing with Tyler Johnson. When he's got everything going for him, I think the Bateman is one of the best all-around players in this draft class. He can do everything well. So that's saying something. Now we get to my guy, who is much higher on my draft board than a lot of people's. Dyami Brown is the most exciting prospect for me personally, outside of Terrace Marshall. Everybody else, they all know about. Coming into this draft process, Dyami Brown was like a 4th or 5th round pick, projection. And I've gotten into his tape, and there's no good way to go about addressing him. You can't press him. He's very good at getting off of press. He's great at eating up space and getting into the deeper parts of the field. That's one thing about the North Carolina offense, is that it was very deep oriented. So he's actually one of the only receivers, the only receiver, I think, that's averaged 20 yards both this year and last year in terms of yards per catch in this draft class. He's that good. And they also just threw the ball up to him. This North Carolina offense was designed to throw the football down the field with Sam Howell at quarterback. He's got a great deep ball, and they do a lot of things off of play action. And you see a lot of single coverage. Sometimes he's over the top. Sometimes he's in contested situations. But Dyami Brown is so dynamic that, he's 6'1" and he's about 190 pounds. So he's got the size to play on the outside. Like I said, he can play against press coverage. He has great hands. He can track the ball extremely well. And I personally believe that he has the explosive speed to play behind line of scrimmage in those short intermediate parts of the field in an offense like, the Chiefs offense, for example. You're going to be able to get him probably in the 3rd round. Excuse me. Good Lord, I'm having trouble with that today. I think he's going to be shooting up draft boards, personally. I think that he's going to be going up there. I have him as a 2nd round draft pick. So everyone that you've seen as 1st and 2nd round talent up, in my opinion, he's so good. And I really think that he's an undervalued commodity in this draft class because of the top end talent. And it's so deep with guys that are, 6'3", tall, that they can do a lot of things at the catch point, but can't necessarily do everything in the short area. I think he has the hip fluidity and foot quickness to get open in the short area with those slants against press coverage, much with that RPO offense that the Chiefs run. I think he'd be a perfect fit in this offense and really be able to unlock a lot of things like Sammy Watkins did when he was fully healthy. He's a guy that I personally like like I said, in the 3rd round for the Chiefs, because I'm not sure he's going to be available. I mean, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to be picked in the 2nd round. I think there's going to be other needs there. But I would draft him in the 2nd round with the Chiefs' 2nd pick. I would do it in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. I think that he's that good, and I think that he's going to be that good. He definitely has the breakaway speed too. He's much like Terrace Marshall in the fact that they're both very good deep threats, but they can do things in the short intermediate parts that their offense wasn't necessarily asked them to do. But you can see little parts that they ask him to do, run like a whip route, for example. He ran a whip route against Virginia and just completely put the corner in a spin cycle and then ran into the end zone. So he's able to do some things in the short area that really separate him from everybody else in this class for me. And the ability to get downfield, not only in straight line speed, but using double moves and all those different areas to track the ball as well and catch in contested situations, is what makes him that for me. So that's why he's number 6. And that's why I've got him so high. I just can't deny the talent there. And I think that he's going to be dynamic, explosive in the NFL. And now this is where it really shifts for me, because we have some question marks after the 6th ranked wide receiver for me. So we'll go to another tier down, and we're going to start with Rondale Moore, who I think could be the most explosive player in this draft in terms of what he can do with the football in his hands. His breakout year was his freshman year in 2018. He's been injury plagued since and hasn't really looked the same, which is kind of problematic going into the NFL. He's got the size and girth that you want out of a guy his size. I think he's what, 5'9, 5'10, 5'11 ish in that area. And he's built, like a brick house. He's 200 pounds, so he's solid. And he's probably the most explosive player in and out of his cuts in this draft class. Unfortunately, we don't know what he's going to really be in his first year because of those injuries. And he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. I guess he played against some of the best competition in football in 2018, going through a bunch of really good defenses in the Big Ten. And he put up over 1,200 yards, double-digit touchdowns. He was just in the end zone, and he was a yak machine. That's something that NFL offenses are really looking for now. So he's going to be a hot commodity at the end of the first, going into the second round. And I do have him as a second round talent because there's a lot of question marks around him. Had he played up to, maybe he had one injury plague season and then came back and was able to, get back to over 1,000 yards in that offense, yeah, I'd have him as a first round talent. I'm not so sure I can project him to being that in the NFL when he's already had 2 seasons in a row that are injury plagued. I liked Rondale Moore a lot. I think that he's going to have, if he keeps healthy, he's going to have a great career in the NFL. But when you're already dealing with a lot of injuries in college, it's hard to keep that going into the NFL. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just difficult. He's got some of the most talent in this draft class, great hands as well, can run all the routes in the route tree, can tack deep down the field, can win in some contested situations. You get him the ball out of the backfield, he's going to make plus yards nine times out of 10. That's just what he does. Then he makes the first man miss almost every time. He's just that good. So I hope for the best for his career, and I really hope to see him in the NFL producing early on because I think that he's definitely got some of the best skills in this draft class. Now into our 8th ranked player, a guy I was really, really high on coming into this whole process and who's fallen down a bit on my scales. This is Kadarius Toney, and he is an interesting prospect to really look at. Played most of his reps out of the slot in his senior year at Florida. Came into Florida to play quarterback. Actually has a much better arm than Kyle Trask does. You see, he's got like a rope. He can throw a rope from anywhere from one side of the field to the other. But it was determined that Kyle Trask was going to be the starter going forward. He wanted to get on the field, and you can clearly see he has the dynamicism to play with the ball in his hands, much like Jaylen Waddle and Rondale Moore. He's a different case because he's about 6 foot, 6'1", and nearly 200 pounds. I think he could play on the outside in the NFL, and that's where the projection comes into. And that's why he's really fallen down my board, is because I don't know if he's going to be able to get there. He played a lot against off coverage in college. He wasn't asked to really get open on his own. He was schemed open. Yes, they're going to do a lot of that in the NFL too, but I want to see him be, more of an outside vertical threat as well, because not only can he do a lot of things with the ball in his hands, but he's a physical runner after the catch. He can definitely make some guys pay, not only miss, but run you over in the open field. So for me, he's a guy that I really, really would like to see in the Chiefs offense, but I personally want a guy I know is going to win on the outside. And I don't know that about Toney. Excuse me. Much like the questions we saw surrounding McCole Hardman coming in, he's more smaller, like DeVonta Smith. He's like 175, 180. He's got the frame, and he can't really put more muscle on because he'll lose a lot of his explosiveness and his speed. That's not Toney. He's going to have the area to put on some more weight, like Tyreek Hill did, and it's going to be up to him to take that next step and go be a vertical threat in the NFL on the outside as well as the inside. If he can take that step and play on the outside and start winning and making defenses respect his speed, much like a Tyreek Hill is going to do, that's where you're going to see him really take off, because I think he has the talent to do everything the NFL wants him to do. You're going to see a lot of fantasy football people talk about his breakout age being his senior year, but again, he was a quarterback on this team. He was recruited to play quarterback, and he made the change to wide receiver. It takes a while to learn all of that. His first couple years, from watching, in my opinion, he was more of a gimmick type player. They got him on the field because of his dynamicism, and that was able to, they were able to generate some big plays that way. He took that next step in terms of being a consistent playmaker with Kyle Pitts on this team. They were the 1 and 2, and they really torched everybody. So he's got the quick twitch ability to really make guys miss anywhere on the field. Got really good hands. He has some drop concerns. We saw in the Senior Bowl, he made some guy look foolish and then he dropped the wide open catch. So there's some question marks there as well. But he literally can run all the routes in the route tree. I personally think he can win in the NFL on the outside. I just need to see it first. So number 8 is Kadarius Toney. Now we're going to go to number 9, which is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I really like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that he can do a lot of things well, much like Rashod Bateman can do. I don't believe that he's a yak guy in the NFL. He looks much more like a possession receiver. He's a bit shorter, but he can run all the routes. He can win outside. He can win inside. He's got extremely good hands, and he's got some really good highlights of catching in contested situations, running some fade routes in the end zone and beating press coverage, things like that. They haven't asked him to do a whole lot more outside of, running slants, running go deep down the field, running comebacks. USC's offense wasn't very dynamic with their quarterback. Slovis was really, really bad. And a lot of that had to do with his production too, with Amon-Ra St. Brown's production. He wasn't able to get a lot of those deep plays down the field where he was open because Slovis couldn't get him the football. Much like Kyle Trask's arm, much like Mac Jones's arm, he was not very good at getting the ball outside the numbers down the field. And that really hindered his production. But one thing that really stuck in my mind was every time USC needed to get down the field, he targeted Amon-Ra St. Brown every time. And there was a game that I watched, and they were down. They needed a touchdown to win with a minute left. Almost every single pass went to Amon-Ra. He was open. He was running comebacks. He was running hitches. He was running slants, and he was just getting open. That's one thing that is very, very important in the NFL, and it's very valuable. Being a possession receiver that has the ability to win in multiple different ways is very valuable. I think that he's a guy that can play on the outside as well. Most of his 2020 tape was of him on the outside, still winning and getting open. A lot of people have pegged him as a slot receiver, a big slot receiver, and I don't see that. He can play on the inside. He can play on the outside. He's going to be able to use his quick hands, his quick feet, his route running ability to get open in those areas. Probably more of a short to intermediate threat in the NFL. I haven't seen much yak ability out of him myself. That doesn't mean it won't come. Doesn't mean it's not there. And it doesn't mean he won't produce a couple big plays a game where he's able to make a guy miss and then go down the field. So I really like him. He's definitely a solid second round pick for me. I think that he's going to be able to come in and be much like Michael Pittman Jr., for example, in the respect that they can be a good possession receiver in the NFL. I think he's a little bit more dynamic than Pittman is. So I like him in the second round. Now we're going to close this out with my very final and on to the last guy on our list, which is Nico Collins out of Michigan. Now, this is a guy who played in a bad offense at Michigan, more run-oriented, definitely more play action, take shots down the field, very good at winning in contested situations, has great hands at the point of attack, can out-muscle just about anybody for the football. Now, the big thing for me that puts him at number 10 is you combine that with the short area quickness that I saw him put on display at the Senior Bowl. Now, this is much like the situation we had last year with the receiver out of Baylor that I really, really, really liked. And for some reason, his name escapes me right now. And I was super, super high on him because I really think that Denzel Mims, there it is, just pops right in the back into my head, Denzel Mims. They both mirror each other in terms of being used more as a vertical threat in their offenses. But I think that there's options with Nico Collins more in a spread-based offense in the NFL. I think you're seeing a little bit more now that he really worked on that after taking 2019 off. And that's something that I really like to see him at the Senior Bowl. He came in, he showed everybody that, look, I can do this too. I'm not just a deep threat guy. Granted, he's very good at those situations, but he's 6'4", like 225, 230. He's a huge guy. He can really outmuscle anybody for the ball at the catch point. And I really, truly believe that he has some of the really good top end speed in this draft. He can use really good footwork to set up corners on the outside and blow by them on the left or to the inside. He's actually quite gifted in terms of being able to set up, stack a corner, and run by him. So that's something I saw on his tape as well. He's obviously got the strength to play through some press on the and some press on the outside in the NFL. I think that bodes well for him. Now, this really is more based off of a projection of what I saw, like I said, at the Senior Bowl. He has all of the tools to be one of the best true deep threats in the NFL in terms of, playing through the contact, everything I said. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns in the red zone for wherever he's drafted. He's able to do all of those things. He can combine that with the short area stuff, getting open in the middle of the field, running good slants, running good digs, everything like that. You're going to see him be a beast at the NFL level. And that's something that I truly believe. And that's not just because I'm a Michigan fan either. He's just got all the tools that you want to see. Louis Riddick and Jim Nagy are both very, very high on him coming into this draft. And I took everything that he did at the Senior Bowl. I really put it into my evaluations because we didn't get any tape from 2020. Just he took it off, opted out, much like Ja'Marr Chase. So you have to be able to use a little level of projection into all of this. And I truly believe from what I saw that he's a top 10 receiver in this draft class. My own opinion. But again, that's what this is. It's an opinion based off everything that I've seen. So that's my top 10 list. Now, you all wanted one guy who's probably going to be a day 3 pick for me to go over. I did a poll. Tamorrion Terry out of Florida State won that poll. Now, there are a few things with Terry. He has, coming off an injury, coming into 2020, his tape from 2020, couldn't find it. It's incredibly difficult to find right now. Florida State's offense is known to be bad quarterback play, bad offensive line play. Really, in reality, it's not going to help me much. So I went back to 2019. I found some games there. Terry is much like Nico Collins in the fact that he has the size and the speed to win in the NFL. Terry's probably a little bit bigger in terms of shoulder width and play strength. And that's saying a lot because I think Nico Collins is one of the best at it in this draft class. So the one thing that he brings is true game breaking speed. They used him in a bunch of different ways. They used him as screen catcher. They used him out of the backfield, running back type, give him the football and go on end arounds and like that. They also used him as a gimmick quarterback. They had him snap the ball, be a wildcat kind of guy and ran the football effectively that way. He has true breakaway speed at any level of the field. That's something that I think is an interesting and very interesting prospect coming out of Terry. But like I said, the injury is an issue. The man just drops footballs that not only hit him in the hands, but he's looking into his hands. Like he's not trying to look ahead to run the football. He just drops them out of nowhere. And that is it's a weird thing for me. And I personally feel that drops are one of the easier things to correct, like really, really bad drops. Hands are one of the easier things to correct, and natural gifted talent at the wide receiver position is rated higher for me. But that's more head scratching than a lot of things that I've ever seen. And a lot of the production at Florida State is not going to allow him to play, to be picked into the first or second or third round for me. So it's just going to be a day 3 pick for me. I think he's a 5th round pick. He has some of the most physical upside of anybody in this draft. And that's saying a lot, like I've talked about. I think there's a lot of very good talented wide receivers in this draft. And Terry has a chance, if he can stay healthy and really get some of his mental aspects of his game, some off-field stuff. Apparently he's not as dedicated to practice and working out as you would like to see. So he needs to clean up a lot of things in his own life, his mental game, and off the field to really truly become the wide receiver prospect that I thought he would be coming in 2019. He took CJ Henderson to school, and he's the best cornerback in that last year's draft, in my opinion. He's going to be an excellent NFL corner. So that there's a lot of talent there. So he needs to really get his head on straight. And I think that he could be an option for the Chiefs on day 3, because not only does he give them a guy who can play the X on the outside, play through that physical contact, much like Sammy Watkins did, but he can really grow into that. And I think that Byron Pringle would be a good receiver to really help him grow, because we've seen Pringle run some really good routes, play through some physicality, and be a burner really with some of his kick returns. So I like adding Terry to the mix on day 3. I don't want anything to do with him before. I'm not entirely sure if he's worth taking a risk on a top 100 pick for me personally. So that's going to conclude our wide receiver rankings. I really hope you guys enjoyed going through this with me. You guys have any requests for maybe some more detail oriented stuff on some of the top guys, the middle guys per se, maybe Terrace Marshall, Rashod Bateman, Dyami Brown, things like that. We can definitely talk about doing some film reviews down the road here. But I just wanted to get you guys my wide receiver rankings. I think that they're different than most people's outside of the top 3. I like being different, really using my own evaluation process to show that I think that there's some guys in this class that are very undervalued. And I think Dyami Brown is the most undervalued wide receiver in this draft. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, you have any questions, anything you want to hear from this draft class, from this wide receiver class, go ahead and hit me on Twitter, D_Harms19. I'll answer your questions there. Also in the questions on Monday night on the RGR channel. I'm more than willing to answer any questions you guys have there too. So have a great day, guys. I hope this was fun. I really enjoy talking about wide receivers. So have a great day.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.